Welcome to another episode of Brand Chops, where we're chopping up brands to see what they're made of. My name is Zack Lemear.
And I'm Chris Duhaime, and today we're going to be diving into that fast growing and mostly misunderstood industry of cannabis and giving some tips and tricks on how to best capitalize on your cannabis business branding in 2025.
Yeah, whether you're in the industry or just brand curious, we'll cover the critical do's and don'ts to avoid costly mistakes and stand out in this competitive market. Cannabis branding is no longer about just being edgy or rebellious. With legalization expanding, the market has matured and so have customer expectations.
Exactly. And I think one of the big things about the branding associated with cannabis businesses right now is that there's a little bit more need for professionalism. It's about creativity, it's about getting rid of that stigma that's still lingering, but you have to navigate that pretty carefully.
Yeah, a recent study found that 71% of consumers are more likely to trust a cannabis brand that feels premium and well thought out. I've got an example. I used to own a cannabis company. It was CBD related. However, I would outperform in every single store every single time because I had professional branding, professional labels. I had all of my stuff locked in. So it looked like a legitimate brand, even though I was a one person shop. And these other people that were literally making it what looked like in their bathtub would have address labels for a label. And it doesn't matter if theirs was better than mine, cheaper than mine, more effective. It did not matter. I sold 10x more every time in every store because just by the perception of looking at one brand, especially compared to the other, wow, if this is how much they spent on just the packaging, imagine what the product is like. Here's the top two do's of cannabis branding. These are all the things that you should be doing. Define your unique value proposition. It's important to stand out in a crowded market by clearly communicating what makes your brand unique. In my case, I saw that the biggest point of mistrust was that everybody was trying these things that were predominantly being sold in gas stations and smoke shops. And that's the only place. And for legal reasons, it's just because it's a high risk product like alcohol. So these places are already rated in their payment processors for high risk because they're selling cigarettes and things. So they had no problem. And that's one of the challenges of having a cannabis brand is all the restrictions. So I decided I would never be seen in a gas station. I would never be seen in a smoke shop. I would never sell vapes and I would never sell flour. I would be a premium only brand that you could trust to be a health lifestyle brand. And that's how I positioned it because that's 9 times out of 10 people like, oh, I don't use that. It's blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get high or whatever. And I'd ask them the first thing I say, oh, well, where did you try it? Oh, I bought it at this gas station. I bought it at this smoke shop. And I'd say, well, there you go. They buy for volume, not for quality. I specifically made the choice not to be where everybody else is so that I could be quality only. And that immediately evokes trust. I understood what my unique value proposition was. And I found the gap and I filled it. So Lowell Farms is a good example. It markets itself as an artisanal organic cannabis producer appealing to eco-conscious consumers. And then there's this book called The Purple Cow. They use the purple cow concept to make your brand remarkable. And that's kind of what I did. It's a Seth Godin book. And the purple cow basically means if you're going down the road, if you're taking a road trip and you're from the city, and then all of a sudden you get into the country and you see a bunch of cows, you're like, hey, wow, look at all those cows. But about 10 minutes in, seeing nothing but cows, it becomes noise, it becomes background. But if you saw a purple cow in the middle of those cows, you'd be like, whoa, look at the purple cow. So the whole lesson of that book is to be the purple cow, is to find a way to stand out and make your brand remarkable. And that's how I tried to do it with what I called purpose hemp extracts, because everybody's purpose should include a little R&R, which had 2 R's in it for ownership reasons and all these other things. And it was about rest, relieving, and relaxing, all health-based. So define your unique value proposition. Leverage educational content. Because a lot of these, the problem in the beginning with cannabis was, in general, is that there was a lot of snake oil in the product where you never knew where it was coming from. There's regulations where you always have to have a lab report and you have to have everything tested heavily so there's no heavy metals or all these things. And so if you become the source of truth, that was the other thing that I tried to do is I would have workshops and trials and have people get the chance to talk to me and ask questions and have lots of content and materials that would educate them. You now become the source of truth. You are now the place that is trustworthy. So If you could educate these consumers on product benefits and safety, it builds that trust and it builds credibility. And that is so key in cannabis because there is so much snake oil. As the industry evolved, the snake oil became surrounded by the services around the product. Now, I'm an expert in cannabis banking. I'm an expert in cannabis insurance. I'm an expert in this. I'm an expert in that when it's only been around for like a year. So you really can't be an expert. But brands like Charlotte's Web, they educate their audience about CBD's benefits through blogs, webinars, things like I said I was trying to do. They try to employ storytelling frameworks like the Story brand to position the consumer as the hero because they're all trying to solve a problem. And if you leverage this educational content with story, so for example, I had a sub brand called Bark Naturals, and it was just for pets. And the tagline was, so your best friend can wag again. It wasn't CBD that tastes better than all the other CBD. It wasn't CBD that's best. It was, I understand why you're coming to me. I understand I'm empathizing, and you're the hero of the story. All you want to do is help your best friend feel like a dog again and not be a lump on the floor because they're doped up from the vet. Understanding the client, leveraging educational content and employing storytelling frameworks helped me craft that tagline, which I think is one of the best taglines I've ever come up with. So your best friend can wag again. That's like being sniped by a Hallmark card. You can't escape that. And everybody can relate to it because it's man's best friend, even if you're a woman. It's just how everybody associates with it. So the next one is building a lifestyle brand. Again, just like I said, it was about purpose. It was about, everybody's purpose should include a little R&R. So when you align your product with a desirable lifestyle, much like alcohol brands like Corona, the beach lifestyle, they show the experience and the lifestyle that you want to live instead of talking about the product all the time. Very rarely do you see Corona talking about its manufacturing methods or its ingredients. It just shows two people on a beach relaxing and enjoying themselves with a little lime on top. And that's with the exception of the whole coronavirus, which was a little interesting challenge for them when Corona got back to being called COVID. But there used to be a whole bunch of memes out there about Corona. And so an example of this is a brand called Candescent. And it markets itself as a luxury wellness brand with a focus on relaxation and self-care, which is, again, what I was trying to do as well. And I even branded everything to look organic because I wanted it to be in farm stands and places like that. So it looked like it came from the earth because it's supposed to be all natural, organic hemp. The next thing is establishing brand consistency, because cohesive visuals and messaging across all platforms reinforce that brand identity. And that's, again, what helped me outperform every single product 10 times more. And I can't tell you how many times I have to refill, and I'd go back to these locations and there'd be dust on all the other competitive products because they were making it in their house and they were literally sealing these things. They had everything that I had. They had a quality product. They had lab reports. They just didn't have the branding. So if you use brand guidelines to maintain uniformity in tone, the logo usage and packaging, like we say in all kinds of different episodes of these things, it all comes down to trust. And there's nothing more important in the CBD space, the cannabis space, than trust. Segmenting your audiences is the next one. So you're going to have different segments. There's going to be medical users. There's going to be recreational users. They each require tailored messaging because they each have a problem that they're trying to solve. Some people are trying to manage pain. Some people are just trying to get to sleep. Some people are just trying to mellow out or have a good time. And so MedMen targets recreational users with a high-end retail experience, with Charlotte's Web appeals to the health conscious. So they're finding their niches, but they understand and they segment their audiences. And again, that's what I was trying to do with the CBD brand. Invest in community engagement, because one of the biggest challenges that cannabis has is that you can't really advertise and you can't really market. You can, in certain cases, on the radio, in print, in certain states, you can do billboards, but you've got to be very careful what you say. You cannot make a claim that it solves a problem. You have to be very careful. So your best friend can wag again was I think was a pretty clever way to get around all that. Everybody's purpose should include a little R&R. And then so instead of saying this product solves this problem, I'd say, people would say, I now walk with purpose. I sleep with purpose. I relax with purpose. not making a claim, but still associating the benefit with the product. So if you build this community, you foster the brand loyalty. And that's one way that you can get the word out about your brand in the cannabis space, because there's a place called Joint Operations in Massachusetts that is doing some really interesting experiential stuff where they're just trying to have, and it's, again, there's a challenge because you're not necessarily allowed to have people enjoy the product on the premises. So you have to find a way to engage them in a way that makes sense. One of the things they have is a secret menu, which I think is really fun. But you've got to go in to take advantage of the secret menu. And then they have, like, for VIP members, it's like $1 for a certain product when it normally costs $60. So it's just, again, building community, getting people together, showing that you're not just selling it, because the other big problem with cannabis is that we're all selling the same thing. And it's hard when you're kind of building a commodity product where everybody's selling the same thing that does the same stuff for everybody. And now it's just more about the experience and the brand and how important you make that in your brand is going to determine how much you sell. Papa and Barkley emphasize local sourcing and partnerships with small farmers, for example. So they're giving back to the community. They participate in local events and advocacy to connect with your audience and things like that. So prioritizing compliance and transparency is the next one. This is a big one because, again, it's all about trust. So cannabis regulations vary by region and trust is paramount. So ensure your labels, your ads, and claims are all fully compliant with local laws. Make sure that you have all of your products rigorously tested and easy to find those tests on your website through a QR code on your labels, so that, and it's got to be per batch and it's got to be per lot. And it might even be different in other states. So I encourage you to do the research. You want to also try to focus on sustainability. A lot of things that I was trying to do, which I never came to fruition, was making eco-friendly practices, not just eco-friendly practices in manufacturing, but product packaging. I was trying to find compostable plastics and things like that to truly lean into the organic brand. Flow Canna markets itself as a sustainable sun-grown cannabis brand, for example. And people, and this is what matters to people. People, especially millennials, Gen Z, the people who have the most buying power in the history of time, they resonate with things that they can believe in too. And they're like, hey, if I'm all about sustainability and I want to protect the earth, but I also want to enjoy the earth's bounty, so to speak, I will choose a brand that aligns with my values before I will choose a brand over price or over selection even. So you also want to try and create an omni-channel presence. Customers research online before purchasing. So you got to develop an engaging website with clear calls to action. You've got to find out where it's legal and where it's okay to communicate these things, do brand collaborations, and leverage tools and frameworks like the Story Brand website checklist. It's very good to show how to make them the hero of the story. Hey, are you suffering with joint pain? Well, I've got a pain bomb for you that will help you walk with purpose. And finally, the number 10 is using data-driven marketing. Analytics will help refine your strategies and measure your return on investment more than anything else, especially in a world where there's so many restrictions. So make sure you utilize customer feedback and sales data to tailor the offerings to the things that are trending. And that's the top 10 do's.
And now I'm going to go quickly over the top 10 don'ts. So these are things that if you're already doing them in your marketing, you may want to look at alternatives to help make your branding a little bit more special, but also stand out a little bit more in your competition. So one of the first don'ts we have is just don't try to copy alcohol and tobacco marketing or branding too closely. There are definitely a lot of parallels and challenges that exist from those industries to cannabis, but there's also some very distinct challenges and opportunities that cannabis can present from a branding perspective. So just make sure that you're looking at all looking at all the potential issues that might come with the cannabis industry. Next, I would say avoid using overly typical or technical jargon. You don't want to make it so that your customers feel alienated, or maybe they're not familiar with those particular terms. Not all of your users are going to be as well educated as you are about the product. So you just want to make sure that when you're talking about it, you're using terms and feelings and ideas that they're going to resonate with. And you want to just focus on the benefits that they're going to get from the THC percentages as opposed to some of the more technical jargon that might be associated with it. Next, I would say don't neglect your visuals when it comes to packaging, your logo, your website. Maybe it's your point of sale packaging as well. So there's things like that that you really just want to make sure you're emphasizing your uniqueness there. Sometimes those things can get overlooked because you might have the best brand or you might have the best product, but your logo and your packaging doesn't necessarily align with that. Make sure you're investing in something that's clean, appealing, and attracts attention on the shelves. So something that can help you pop out among a number of different brands that are out there. Think about when you're going to the grocery store and you're looking for some sort of different lemonade. There's all kinds of different brands that exist. So your eye might be attracted to a specific label. Things like wine are another example where you're going to be on a shelf with a number of different brands that are all selling the same thing you are. So you need to find ways to have your packaging differentiate yourself. Next, I would say don't rely solely on that stoner stereotype. Although that's going to be part of your audience, it's probably just going to be a limited piece of it. And it's really just a niche section of that audience. So make sure that you're really identifying who your ideal clients are, who are the ones that are coming back, who are the ones that are really trying to understand your product, and you want to make sure that you're hitting that target a little bit more effectively and not just doing that overarching stoner stereotype. One example of this is Deucist. It targets like health conscious professionals, not just recreational users. So look at some of the branding that they're putting out into the ether, and that might give you some examples or some ideas on how to better target some different audiences. Next, I would say avoid greenwashing. Claims about sustainability and credibility and all those things. You just need to make sure that when you're making claims like that, you have the credibility to be able to back it up. And a lot of brands in your industry are doing that. So make sure that that's not your only differentiating factor. Although it can be part of your brand, it doesn't need to be your whole brand. Another big thing is don't overpromise. A lot of brands will overpromise or exaggerate what their product can do. The medical benefits, or maybe it's just the overall feeling you're going to have. If you don't live up to expectations, you're going to damage your credibility and you're going to be breaking promises that you're making with your audience. You don't want to do that. It's a big part of branding in general is being able to keep your promises. If you're not able to hit those benefits, it's going to look poorly upon your audience, and then it's also going to reflect in how they talk about you to other people. So if you're going to be providing those, make sure it's evidence-based claims that are going to have all the regulatory checks and balances that you need to make sure you avoid any scrutiny that might be coming from that. Next, I would say would be avoiding legal restrictions. You want to avoid ignoring those. You want to make sure that you're really taking a deep look into what restrictions are on your industry in your particular area, in your state, overarching in the federal scenario. There's a lot of missteps that you can make in marketing that can lead to some really big fines. So recently there was a company that had a cartoon represent their brand. It was a seemingly innocent mistake, but they looked at that cartoon as a way for children to connect with their brand. And so that brought down a lot of legal issues that can be really difficult for a brand to get through. Fines, different things like that. Think about Camel when cigarettes used to come out and how that became such a big issue at that time. So making sure that you're mindful of those and make sure you have a legal team on your side that's going to be able to review your campaigns and make sure that everything's in alignment before you launch something. Next, I would say don't underestimate your competitor analysis. Really dig into who you want to align with from a competitor's perspective, and then find your unique value compared to them. So really understanding your competitors, who's going to be sitting next to you on the shelf. Are they going to be going more for quality and maybe natural ingredients? Are they looking more for quantity? They're just trying to get as much out there as they possibly can so they have cheaper pricing. Identify who all those are and where you align with that, and do a SWOT analysis to really identify where the gaps in the market is. And just in case you don't know what a SWOT is, it's strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you want to look at your industry from that perspective and get a really good analysis of what can make you different in that market. I'd also look at books like Blue Ocean, which is a really good example of how to differentiate yourself. And when you read that, you'll see that it's about building a new market and being able to do that effectively based on research and looking at the competitors. Next, I would say, again, I think the generalization of your audience, we talked a little bit about the stoners earlier. Just make sure you have multiple levels of buyer personas and different targeting marketing techniques for each of those different demographics because they're all going to be different. You want to be able to treat them differently as well, and your messaging and maybe even your packaging as well. Lastly, I would say you want to avoid short-term thinking. So you want to build a lasting brand, something that's going to last the test of time. You want to build a long-term strategy. So don't just look at what's going on right now in today's trends, but look long-term. You can utilize today's trends now, but make sure that it's not going to be the only method you're using on a long-term strategy. So this could be, how you're going to bring new products to market, how you're planning on retaining your customers, and then your overall brand and how you want to represent yourself to the market.
That's a lot to go through, everybody, but these are some really solid tips on how to craft your brand in the cannabis space. Again, with this avoiding short-term thinking thing, it's such a competitive space, and there's a black market. Not so much with CBD a black market, but with cannabis, THC levels of cannabis, there is a black market that undercuts everything. Now, the one big difference between that is you don't really know what you're getting from the guy down the street, and you can validate and qualify everything you're getting from the store. Huge differences in quality, price, etc. However, if you're not trying to think about this ahead of time, you're going to just get lost in the shuffle. In the beginning, there were so many people fighting for licensing, and now they've got all these licenses. And now, in Massachusetts, for example, there's a ton of dispensaries everywhere. There's a ton. And they're all relatively, yes, they have different visual branding, but they're all relatively saying the same things, selling the same things. They're not doing anything innovative. There's one place in Boston that I thought did a great job where they have a cannabis museum, and it's just like an attraction for the people in the lifestyle that are interested in it. And it's like, hey, great, now I can go there, I can check it out, I can learn about it, I can see where this came from. But you don't see that very often. And I'm sure that's driving a lot of sales, because now I'm going to go to this place, and then you usually exit through the gift shop and you know what's in that gift shop. Anyway, so let's just talk a little bit more just briefly about comparing it to alcohol and tobacco. Now, as I said before, regulations call, especially for your banking regulations and your point of sale regulations, you've got to get specific permission to sell these things and collect the funds, or else you could be, it's complicated. It's like cannabis is both CBD, which is hemp, and it's also THC, which is more marijuana, but they're all both classified under cannabis. So if you think about it like this, they say flowers are federally illegal. Tulips are legal everywhere. Roses are legal depending on where your states are, but flowers in general, those are illegal. That's how cannabis works right now. It's kind of crazy. So in order to get regulations, you have to make sure that you're being approved for these high risk sales. Cannabis branding can draw lessons from alcohol and tobacco while avoiding their pitfalls. So in alcohol, emulate the creation of this aspirational lifestyle like Heineken, but avoid excessive glamorization, because they also have rules against glamorizing drinking and driving or something like that. And tobacco, they leverage educational campaigns like The Truth while maintaining transparency and focusing on harm reduction. You've just got to do the research. When I was building my CBD business, I went to every single CBD store that I possibly could find, every place that I could find that sold CBD, and I pretended to be stupid. I pretended to go in there and know nothing. I wanted to see how they treated me. I wanted to see how their level of understanding of the product. I wanted to ask them questions that I felt like were common questions, that to see if they could even answer the questions and what the answers were, if they were misleading me or not. And 90% of the time, I found that the bar was so low, I was tripping over it. So it was easy for me to find and create a brand that would defeat them all, because now they were building a experience of mistrust. You don't go into a smoke shop and buy a product that you feel like is going to be good for you. You don't go into a gas station and buy anything that you feel like is going to be healthy. You're going to buy energy drinks and cigarettes and lottery tickets and beer and junk food. We just want to make sure that you're leveraging the lessons of alcohol and tobacco, because it is basically the same space, which is why a lot of these things are being sold in the same spot, and also avoiding being too much like them so that you don't get in trouble. Like we mentioned before, creating a logo that could appeal to children, even though it was seemingly innocent. to have a cartoon character of like a mermaid or something. I think this was a company in Maine, and they got in big trouble and had to call a bunch of lawyers, IP lawyers, and figure out all this stuff and then pay tons of fines. And then also they had to rebrand, which when you're establishing a brand and you're, I mean, if everyone knows me as Zack and then all of a sudden tomorrow I show up and I'm going to be called, nope, now tomorrow I'm going to be called Highlighter. That's my new word. That's my new name. I want everyone to refer to me as Highlighter. And no one's going to know who I am. And I'm going to have to spend months and months and months being consistently called Highlighter before people just start calling me Highlighter. I know that's a weird example, but
thanks, Highlighter. That's really good. So I guess one really good example that I've seen is Wild Gummies. That's WYLD, Wild Gummies. They're doing a really good job of just nailing their visual identity. They've got a really good storytelling. So they're doing a good job of appealing to multiple audiences, the casual and the medical users. So look at a brand like that as one to emulate and one to look at some of the tips and tricks that they're doing.
Yeah, and on the other hand, we've seen brands fumble by leaning too heavily on gimmicks and not focusing on building trust. And that's a quick way to lose customers. People are saying, "Oh, well, it's the most organic." If you were to drive through Massachusetts and you look at all the different billboards with cannabis and exit 5 and this is the best blah blah blah, and everybody's getting it from basically the same place and it's all the same stuff. But we've got to make sure that you're not leaning too heavily on gimmicks, because this is not all based on trust, and gimmicks are not strong enough to last.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, the goal for this podcast is to give you sort of some actionable next steps, some takeaways that you can bring to your business plan or your brand plans. Some of the things we want to emphasize is just make sure you're talking a lot about quality and transparency. From a legal perspective, you just want to make sure you're backing those claims up with some really good research. But as markets start to expand and consolidate, consumers are looking for brands they can trust. So just make sure that you're backing a lot of that up with some third-party lab results, where you're highlighting cultivation practices. Let the customer sort of see behind the curtain, and whether that's through virtual tours, showcasing the facility, authenticity. Seals on packages are really important too, because they just showcase exactly who you are and what you can bring to that market. Another key takeaway could be differentiate through purpose-driven branding. So, look at some of the larger players in the space and how they're standing out by being mission-driven, and they're selling their products that align with the social cause. So something that directly impacts either the actual community itself or the community around that particular shop or that particular brand. Next, I would look at really targeting education and content marketing, going a little bit back to what we said earlier, being able to educate your market on keywords they might be looking for, different types of strains, different dosing ideas, different ways to position the brand that will help make sure you're a trusted guide and not just a seller of the product. You're really trying to educate them on the benefits of it. I would make sure that you look again really carefully at the compliance issues and try to think creatively to work around those. There's tons of restrictions when it comes to advertising, especially on social media. So you've got to find unique ways to get around that. And maybe you're promoting different products that are not directly related to cannabis, but maybe you will get somebody to your website, and then from there you can sell them on other products you have. Maybe there's different alternatives to digital marketing channels, something that's a little bit more cannabis friendly and focuses a little bit more on owned media, like email list, direct messaging people on social media or on LinkedIn, whatever the case may be. That will circumvent a lot of the restrictions. So if you directly reach out to people, it'll help make that connection a little bit more valid. Next, I would say put a lot of thought into your packaging design. It's going to be your first impression on the shelf. So just make sure that you're really standing out to the audience and you're portraying that emotional feeling that you want them to have. If you're using eco-friendly materials, make sure the labeling reflects that. If you're using some distinct flavor or style, make sure that that's conveyed appropriately on the labeling. But just make sure everything's quality, it's professional, and make sure that what you're using is sustainable as well. Next, I want to talk a little bit about personalized experience. So make sure you're building that personal experience with your audience. You want to make sure that in this creative market space, you're really tailoring your products and your recommendations to a specific person or type of person so that they can really see themselves in your marketing and know that your product will solve their issues. You can do things like loyalty apps, or maybe you're tracking preferences through your CRM with different products that they may purchase over time, and maybe you're sending out specific email campaigns to that particular type of audience. So there's a lot of ways to segment your audience and then be able to capitalize on marketing to them later. And then find ways to collaborate with other brands in your area. So maybe you're teaming up with an alcohol brand, or maybe you're teaming up with an event planner, or maybe there's different opportunities in your area where you can strategically partner with them on an event or some sort of promotion where you can build the credibility by attaching yourself to a different brand. But it also gives you a little bit more leeway when it comes to marketing and advertising, because they might have a little bit less limitations. You can team up with lifestyle brands, wellness brands, things like that. You want to just look for those complementary brands that you can align your cannabis products with, and then also make sure that you're building a lot of local community engagement. So really getting engaged with maybe local farmers markets or local events that are going on. If there's ways to get to the people that are in your area, that's going to be your most successful, because they're going to keep coming back. You want to, maybe it's hosting local events. Maybe it's some sort of educational workshop that you can put together, something for charity. There's a lot of opportunities there to be able to help reduce that stigma that is associated with cannabis, and then foster a little bit more loyalty. Lastly, I would say, that incorporation with wellness and lifestyle could really help foster your brand. There's a lot of wellness routines that include cannabis, so just making sure that you're aligning with some of those. Those are a completely different demographic. So you just make sure that when you're building that type of branding and messaging, that you're talking about all those health benefits that you're going to get. Synergy that cannabis has with that health habits like yoga and meditation and things like that.
And remember, cannabis is a product, but the brand is what builds loyalty. Consumers want more than a product. They want a story they can trust. And I've said this probably 1,000 times. I don't believe that anyone buys or sells anything but brands. Because when's the last time you found yourself going to place to buy thing? Never. You go to Amazon to buy K-Cups. You go to Walmart to buy a Dyson. You go to a brand to buy a brand. It's always about the brand. So know your audience. Are you targeting recreational users, medical patients, or both? Invest in quality design and storytelling to build trust. And stay informed. This is the biggest thing about compliance, and adjust your branding accordingly, because it is a wild, wild west out there.
Yeah, and I would say we went over a lot of content today on this podcast. So if you've got specific questions, hit us up on social media. Let's keep the conversation going. We'd love to answer any questions you might have regarding some of the marketing campaigns you're putting together, and see if we can help elevate your brand.
Yeah, thanks for chopping it up with us on cannabis branding today. Subscribe to Brand Chops for more insights on how strong branding can help just about every part of your business. It's not just your logo. So I'll see you next time on Brand Chops, where we chop up brands and see what they're made of.
See you guys.
Brand Chops is brought to you by the fine people at Pivot Creative. Pivot Creative is a full-service branding and marketing agency that partners with businesses to build brands that connect, so that every dollar you spend is an investment and not an expense. If you need some branding or marketing guidance, a website, a new brand, or want to learn more about one of the topics we cover on the show, please reach out to us at pivotcreative.com. If you know someone that would benefit from learning more from one of our shows, please share the episode. Visit brand-chops.com. And as always, like and subscribe if you find this content to be helpful. See you next time on Brand Chops, where we chop up brands to see what they're made of.